Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You know how much we love to really get into a topic here, and today we're going to be exploring something that I think is going to really make you think.
Oh,
We're going to
yeah.
be taking a look at this fascinating idea that maybe the world is a lot less about this or that, black or white,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot more about spectrums. And we're going to be doing that by taking a close look at an article titled, "Is Everything on a Spectrum?"
Yeah.
So by the end of this, hopefully, we'll all be seeing things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Ready to challenge some assumptions about the world.
I think a lot more people than we realize tend to simplify the world around us.
Yeah.
We love to categorize, right, put things into neat little boxes, like it or not like it, good or bad, this or that.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, but the truth is, reality is way more nuanced than that.
For sure. And it's funny because the article talks about this, how our brains, kind of like those shortcuts, right?
Oh, yeah.
It uses a really great example, too, color.
We see red, blue, green, but like, what does that even actually mean?
Well, it's all about perception.
Okay.
We perceive these distinct colors, but they're really just a tiny little fraction of a vast spectrum of light wavelengths, right?
Right.
It's like we're looking at a rainbow through this teeny tiny pinhole, and we're missing like this whole vibrancy of what's actually there.
So there's this whole universe of colors out there that we can't even see.
Right.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else we're missing out on just because our senses are kind of limited in a way.
It really does.
But even with things that we think we totally get, like temperature, the article was talking about how even that is more than meets the eye.
Yeah, we talk about hot and cold as if they're total opposites.
Yeah.
But cold is just the absence of heat energy,
Okay.
right? It's a point on a spectrum. That's all it is.
Mhm.
Even absolute zero, which we think of as the ultimate coldness,
Right.
still has a tiny bit of motion at the quantum level.
Whoa. So it's like the universe is telling us there are no hard stops, just like gradations.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
It's pretty wild when you think about it that way. That nature loves spectrums.
Yeah.
And this idea goes way beyond just color or temperature, right?
Yeah,
It even applies to life itself, which is where things get really interesting.
absolutely. We tend to think of life as a binary. It's
Yeah.
either alive or it's not alive.
Right.
But this article brought up viruses, and they really blur the lines.
Oh, yeah, they do for sure.
Do they reproduce? Do they evolve? Yeah, but they can't do it on their own.
So are viruses alive?
Mm.
Are they not?
It's a really good question.
I don't know, it makes you rethink that whole definition of life, right?
Absolutely. It's not a simple on-off switch.
Hmm.
The article suggests that maybe life is better understood as a gradual increase in complexity,
Okay.
a spectrum, rather than just this binary yes or no.
So maybe the question isn't, is it alive? But how alive is it?
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. Which brings us to another area where this whole spectrum idea plays out. Emotions.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like purely happy or purely sad?
Yeah, I don't think it's very common to just experience one emotion by itself.
Right.
It's always kind of this blend, a complex mix, right?
Right.
You could be excited about something, but also maybe a little apprehensive about it at the same time.
Yeah, totally. You can be happy and sad.
Absolutely.
All these things at the same time, yeah.
And to try to pin it down as just one emotion, it really oversimplifies how complex our feelings are.
Yeah. We contain multitudes.
Yeah.
But it's not just about our inner worlds, right? The article takes this spectrum concept to a whole other level, cosmic level.
Oh, wow.
Suggests that even time isn't what we think it is.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
It brought up Einstein's theory of relativity,
Yeah.
which just blew my mind.
Yeah, time can bend and stretch. That's crazy to think about.
Based on gravity. So like, imagine you're hanging out near a black hole. Where gravity is super intense, time slows down for you relative to someone back on Earth.
So it's like different depending on where you are.
Yeah, it's like a cosmic time warp.
Exactly. And it's not this fixed, absolute thing that we just assume it is.
Right.
It's a spectrum. It's a fluid concept that's influenced by, space-time.
So what we experience as time might be totally different for someone somewhere else in the universe.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
And it gets even more mind-boggling.
Oh, no how?
The article touches on quantum mechanics,
Okay.
where it suggests that even existence itself might be a spectrum.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying things might not even exist in a definite way?
Well, quantum mechanics proposes this idea called superposition.
Okay.
Basically, particles can exist in multiple states at the same time.
At the same time.
Until they're observed.
So until we look at it, a particle is both here and not here.
It's kind of like, imagine a coin spinning in the air.
Okay.
Until it lands,
Yeah.
it has the potential to be heads or tails. But it's not definitely one or the other yet.
Wow.
Observation forces the particle to choose a state.
That's a lot to process.
It is, yeah.
So if even existence is a spectrum, does that mean our whole black and white view of reality is totally flawed?
I think that's the main point here.
Yeah.
The universe at its very core is full of ambiguity, of in-betweens, of gradients, right?
Right.
These rigid lines that we tend to draw are more about us needing to categorize and simplify than how things actually are.
So where do we fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Where do we fit into this fluid, spectrum-filled reality? What does all this mean for us?
That's a really great question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about next.
Okay, I can't wait.
I think it really challenges this idea that we are like fixed, unchanging entities.
Okay.
You know, if the universe itself is in this constant state of flux,
Yeah,
why wouldn't we be too?
that's true. That makes sense. But how does this idea of like a fluid self, how does that actually play out in our lives?
Well, the article used a really interesting example.
Right. Our skin,
Okay.
we think of it as this solid boundary,
Right.
separating like me from the outside world.
Yeah.
But when you look at it on a microscopic level, it's constantly exchanging matter and energy with everything around it.
Mm.
We're absorbing sunlight, shedding skin cells, breathing air.
Right.
So where does me end and the world begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. And then there's the whole thing about our gut bacteria,
Oh, yeah.
which is mind-blowing to me.
It's one.
Trillions of microorganisms just living inside of us.
Yeah.
Essential for digestion, immune system, maybe even our moods.
Who knows? Yeah.
But technically, they're not us, right?
Right.
So who are we? Like, are we just a collection of cells?
It's a good question.
Are we a host for other organisms?
It really makes you realize that our perception of self is way more fluid and interconnected than we tend to think.
Yeah.
And even at a cellular level, we're in constant flux.
Right.
Like the you of today is literally made of different material than the you of a decade ago.
Oh, wow.
Because our cells are constantly dying and being replaced.
So we're not just changing emotionally and mentally, but like physically too.
Absolutely.
We're almost like ships that have had every plank replaced over time, but we still call it the same ship.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It's fascinating and a little unsettling,
Yeah, for sure.
wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Really challenges those assumptions that we have.
Yeah, and this idea of the self as like a spectrum, this process of continual change, has implications for how we view everything else, right?
Does.
Like intelligence and
Right.
mental health.
Absolutely.
We often think of intelligence as this one measurable thing.
Right. You're either smart or you're not.
Right, exactly.
But the article highlights all these different types of intelligence,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's logical, mathematical, linguistic, spatial, musical.
It goes on and on and on.
The list goes on.
We all have strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yeah. I love
Someone might be brilliant at like solving complex equations.
it, but terrible at writing a poem.
Exactly, and vice versa.
It reminds me of that quote, everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid.
It's so true.
I love that.
And it's such a good analogy for this.
It really is. Yeah. So recognizing intelligence as a spectrum allows us to value all these different abilities, right?
Absolutely.
Appreciate the unique genius within each person.
Yeah, and it challenges this hierarchy that we put on intelligence.
Totally.
Like one is better than the other when that's not the case at all.
And this same kind of spectrum thinking can be applied to mental health, too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The old sane-insane binary is
so outdated.
so outdated and unhelpful.
It really is.
The article really emphasizes that mental well-being is not an on-off switch.
Yeah.
It exists on this gradient,
Absolutely.
the
right.
spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of seeing things in terms of healthy versus unhealthy,
Yeah,
we should be looking at the full spectrum of human experience,
for sure.
right? Recognizing we all have ups and downs, moments of clarity and struggle,
Absolutely.
and what might be labeled as a disorder in one context
Yeah.
could be the source of unique strengths and creativity in another.
I love that.
So we need to move away from judgment and towards understanding the full spectrum of human experience.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
This is also thought-provoking,
It is.
but I think it's important to address kind of the elephant in the room here.
Okay.
If everything is on a spectrum,
Yeah.
does that mean there's no absolute truth?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I think philosophers have been grappling with that forever.
For sure.
It's definitely a challenge to reconcile that idea of a spectrum with our desire for, clear moral guidelines.
Right, because if everything's relative,
Yeah,
how do we know what's right and wrong?
it's a good question.
Does embracing the spectrum lead to, like, moral ambiguity?
I don't think it necessarily means abandoning our moral compass altogether,
Okay.
but it does invite us to be more nuanced in our thinking. Instead of resorting to these rigid categories of good and bad,
Right.
we can try to understand the context, the motivations, the complex factors that contribute to why people do the things they do.
So it's less about judging and more about understanding.
Absolutely.
Recognizing everyone is on their own unique journey,
Yeah,
navigating this complex world with their own set of experiences and challenges.
for sure. And who are we to judge where they are on that journey?
That's a good point.
Embracing the spectrum encourages empathy,
Yeah.
compassion,
Right.
willingness to see the world through other people's eyes.
It sounds like embracing the spectrum is a call for greater understanding
Yeah.
and humility.
Absolutely. It encourages us to question our own assumptions.
Yeah.
And recognize that, our own perspective is limited.
Right.
And if nothing is truly absolute,
Yeah.
then clinging to these rigid beliefs
Right.
becomes a lot less appealing.
Totally. So instead of trying to impose our own view of the truth onto other people,
Yeah.
we can approach every interaction with curiosity and openness.
I love that. Yeah. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
When we approach life with this spectrum mindset,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up with so much
Right.
learning, growth, connection.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It really is.
I'm starting to see how this shift in thinking can have like a ripple effect on our lives,
It really can.
expanding our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
For sure. And it doesn't just stop there.
Where else does it go?
This concept of the spectrum has implications for how we approach everything, from social justice to climate change
Right.
to technological innovation.
Wow. Okay. I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's a lot, but
Yeah.
but it's all connected.
I could see how it applies to like social justice issues.
Yeah,
Especially in a world where things are so often oversimplified into like us versus them.
absolutely. Binary thinking leads to these false dichotomies,
Right.
which just creates division and conflict. But when we embrace the spectrum,
Yeah.
we can start to recognize that there are multiple perspectives, multiple experiences,
Yeah.
multiple truths even.
It allows us to move beyond those like simplistic and often harmful labels.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And it helps us recognize the shared humanity that connects us all,
Exactly.
despite our differences.
I couldn't agree more. And the same kind of thinking can be applied to climate change.
Okay.
It's often presented as a binary choice.
Okay.
You either believe in it or you deny it.
Yeah.
But the reality is way more nuanced than that.
Right.
The science is complex,
Yeah.
and the solutions require a spectrum of approaches, from individual actions to global policy changes.
So instead of getting stuck in this debate about who's right and who's wrong,
Right.
we can start focusing on finding common ground
For sure.
and working together to create a more sustainable future for everyone.
Absolutely. Exactly. And when it comes to technology, the spectrum mindset is crucial. With new innovations emerging all the time at this crazy pace.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
It's tempting to just view technology as either a force for good or a threat to humanity.
Right. Right.
But the reality is
More complicated.
more complex, as always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of just blindly embracing or rejecting new technologies, we need to approach them with this discerning eye,
Absolutely.
considering their potential benefits and risks, their impact on individuals and society as a whole.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that technology itself isn't inherently good or bad.
Okay.
It's a tool. It's a spectrum of possibilities that we have the power to shape and direct.
I'm seeing more and more how this spectrum mindset is not just about changing how we think,
Yeah.
but changing how we act in the world.
It really is. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and making choices that contribute to, the well-being of the whole.
Not just ourselves.
Not just ourselves. Exactly.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It really has.
But I have to ask,
Yeah.
are there any potential downsides to this kind of thinking?
That's a really good question.
If we embrace the spectrum
Yeah.
and acknowledge there are multiple truths,
Yeah.
does that make it harder to make decisions,
It's a valid concern.
to take action?
Yeah, I think embracing the spectrum can feel kind of paralyzing sometimes. When we see all sides of an issue,
Right.
all the nuances, all the complexities, it can be hard to know what to do.
Yeah, because there's no easy right or wrong answer.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means we should just give up on, on truth or shy away from making hard decisions.
Yeah.
I think it just means approaching those decisions with more humility
Okay.
and awareness.
So it's about recognizing the limitations of our own perspective,
Yes.
being open to new information,
Yeah,
and being willing to change our minds as we learn and grow.
exactly. And sometimes, even with all the information in the world, we still have to make decisions based on incomplete knowledge. That's just how life is.
Right.
But by embracing the spectrum, we can at least approach those decisions with more responsibility
Yeah.
and a willingness to, course correct if we need to.
So it's not about throwing out our values or principles.
Right.
It's about holding them with an open hand.
Yeah,
Recognizing our understanding is always evolving.
absolutely. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the spectrum mindset.
Yeah.
It encourages continual learning, growth, adaptation,
Right.
allows us to approach life with curiosity and wonder
I love that.
instead of clinging to these rigid beliefs that may not even serve us anymore.
Okay, so we've explored how embracing the spectrum can help us be more understanding, more compassionate, more responsible.
For sure.
We've even talked about how it can influence our approach to like social issues,
Right.
technological advancements.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else we can learn from this concept?
Oh, there's so much.
Is there anything beyond just acknowledging the shades of gray?
Yeah. I think one of the most profound lessons I've learned from this is the importance of fluidity.
Okay.
It's a reminder that nothing is fixed.
Yeah.
Nothing is absolute.
Right.
Everything is in a constant state of flux.
So instead of clinging to these rigid definitions and categories,
Yeah.
maybe it's more about embracing the flow,
I love
the ever-changing nature of reality.
Exactly. And this applies to our own lives, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not static beings.
Right.
We're always growing,
Yeah.
evolving, changing, and that's a beautiful thing.
It is. Yeah.
It means we have the potential to learn and grow throughout our lives. We can change our minds.
Yeah.
We can develop new skills.
Mm-hmm.
We can become more compassionate.
Yeah.
And understanding this fluidity can be so liberating.
Okay.
It frees us from this pressure to be perfect,
Yeah.
to have all the answers,
Right.
to fit into some mold that may not even be right for us.
Yeah. I feel that.
It allows us to just embrace who we are in all of our messy, complex glory.
And wouldn't that make it easier to embrace the complexity of other people too?
Absolutely. The more we can accept ourselves,
Yeah.
the easier it becomes to accept others.
Right.
And that acceptance, that compassion, that's the foundation for building strong, healthy relationships,
Yeah.
communities, and societies.
So embracing the spectrum isn't just this personal journey.
Oh.
It's a collective one.
It is.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels seen and heard and valued for who they are.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
I love that vision.
So spectrums aren't just about recognizing the shades of gray in between the black and white.
Yeah.
They're about embracing the fluidity, the constant evolution,
Yeah.
the infinite possibilities of existence.
That's a beautiful way to sum it up.
This has been so inspiring.
It has.
But I'm wondering,
Yeah.
how can we integrate this into our daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah, how do we move beyond the theory and into like actual practice?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
The first step is just recognizing that this binary thinking is everywhere.
Mm.
It's in the language we use, the
Wow.
messages we consume,
Yeah,
the assumptions we make about ourselves and others.
it's like we need to develop this spectrum detector.
I love that.
Right. Noticing those moments when we're slipping into that black and white thinking.
Absolutely. And once we become aware of it, then we can start to challenge it. We
Okay.
can choose to use more inclusive language,
Mhm.
to seek out diverse perspectives,
Wow.
to question those simple explanations.
That's great advice. And I think it's important to remember that embracing the spectrum is like
Yeah.
an ongoing process.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not something you just achieve overnight.
Right. Exactly.
It's a lifelong journey of learning, unlearning, and relearning.
It's a journey that's worth taking.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, embracing the spectrum is about embracing the full richness and complexity of human experience.
It is.
It's about seeing ourselves and each other with more understanding, compassion, and love.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more.
So listeners, are you ready to ditch those binary boxes and embrace this beautiful, messy,
I love that.
spectrum-filled reality that we live in?
Yes.
Because trust me, it's way more interesting this way.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of spectrums.
It's been a pleasure.
But don't worry, we're not done yet.
We'll be back.
In part 3, we're going to explore some specific practices and exercises that can help you integrate this spectrum mindset into your daily life.
I'm excited for that.
Unlock your creative potential and discover new depths of meaning and purpose.
We'll see you there.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We've covered so much about spectrums, from the nature of reality to, how our sense of self is so fluid.
Yeah, it's been a lot to take in.
It has, right? But now I'm curious, how do we actually put this into practice in our lives? Like, how do we actually live with a spectrum mindset?
That's the big question, right? And it's funny because even the word spectrum, it has limitations. It kind of implies that there are two endpoints, like a start and a finish.
Right.
But maybe it's more like a sphere, or this multidimensional web.
I like that. Not just a straight line.
Yeah.
Something way more complex and interconnected.
Absolutely.
Reminds me of like systems thinking.
Yeah.
How everything's linked.
Exactly. And when you apply that to spectrums, our actions, our choices, even just existing, they're constantly influencing and being influenced by everything else.
With the butterfly effect.
Exactly. Small changes can have these huge, unpredictable consequences.
So it's not enough to just understand spectrums in our head. We have to actually live it.
Right.
Realizing that even the smallest things we do matter.
I agree.
Because they ripple out into the world.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is, right.
It also brings in this whole other level of compassion, though. Because if we're all part of this interconnected web, harming someone else ultimately is harming ourselves, It's
true. It really is that we're all in this together kind of thing.
Exactly.
So how do we start to actually shift our actions? Like, what can we do differently?
Well, I think it starts with those small everyday choices.
Okay.
Let's say you're having a conflict with someone. Instead of just labeling them as wrong or bad immediately, try to see things from their perspective. What experiences might have shaped their view? What needs are they trying to meet?
So it's about asking questions. Instead of jumping to conclusions.
Absolutely.
Assuming good intentions.
It's not always easy.
Especially when we're hurt or angry.
It can be hard, but that's when this mindset is most important. It allows us to respond with empathy and understanding instead of just reacting with judgment or blame.
So how do we get better at that? How do we cultivate that empathy?
One practice I find helpful is to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay.
Read books by authors from different backgrounds than you.
Right.
Listen to podcasts with guests who have different opinions than you. Engage in respectful conversations with people who challenge your views.
Expand our horizons. Get out of our echo chambers a bit.
Exactly. And the more we do that, the more we start to see the world in shades of gray instead of black and white.
And we appreciate the complexity of human experience.
Absolutely.
It's harder to demonize the other when we realize they're just as complex as we are.
That's such a good point. And this open-mindedness, this willingness to embrace the spectrum, it's not just about being a good person.
Okay.
It's about being a more effective problem solver.
Oh, how so? I'm curious.
When we approach a problem with that binary mindset, we're really limiting our options. We're stuck in that either thinking. But when we embrace the spectrum, a whole world of possibilities opens up. We start to see solutions in those in-betweens, those areas of overlap, of integration.
Instead of A or B, maybe it's some combination.
Exactly, like a new option C.
Right.
And that's where innovation comes from. It's not about choosing sides. It's about seeing the bigger picture, connecting the dots, and creating something new.
This reminds me of how we were talking about creativity earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And the spectrum.
Absolutely.
When we let go of those rigid categories, we unlock our potential to think outside the box.
Absolutely. When we embrace the spectrum, we're not just accepting different perspectives.
Right.
We're integrating them into our own thinking.
Right. It's like adding new colors to our palette.
I love that.
Expanding what we can create.
It's beautiful.
So this mindset isn't just about tolerance or acceptance.
It's deeper than that. It's about actively seeking out and integrating different views into our own understanding.
That's what fuels growth
For sure.
and innovation.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and it's not just about external problem solving or creativity. Embracing the spectrum also impacts our inner world.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
When we apply this mindset to ourselves, we can be so much more compassionate and accepting of our own flaws and imperfections. We stop seeing ourselves as just good or bad.
Right.
And we recognize that we are this complex mix of strengths and weaknesses, talents and limitations.
We give ourselves permission to be human.
Yes. With all the messiness that comes with it.
It's so liberating, right?
It really is.
It frees us from that pressure to be perfect.
That's huge.
To live up to some ideal version of ourselves that might not even be real.
Right. It allows us to embrace who we actually are.
And wouldn't that make it easier to embrace the complexity of others too?
Absolutely. The more we accept ourselves, the easier it becomes to accept other people.
And that acceptance, that compassion, that's the foundation for those good relationships.
It is, for sure.
For good communities, good societies.
Absolutely.
So embracing the spectrum isn't just a personal journey, it's a collective one.
It really is. It's about creating a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
That's a beautiful vision, one worth striving for.
I agree.
Well, everyone, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of spectrums.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope this has been as thought-provoking for you as it's been for me.
Me too.
Remember, the world is full of spectrums.
Absolutely.
Embrace the complexity, challenge those binary boxes, and never stop exploring those infinite possibilities that exist within you and the world around you.
It's all out there.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.